Hi everyone. Today I have the pleasure to talk with Joan Goyeau, who is a senior software engineer at Netflix in the data analytics department. Joan is also the author of a popular Kubernetes client, all written in Scala, and that is used widely in the industry by companies like Apple. So please welcome Joan. So I wanted to start this interview by asking you, what do you do exactly at Netflix? Or what's your job?
So I'm a data engineer and I'm focused on the playback data.
Okay.
So what our org is basically, we're not like building Netflix as it, directly, but we're collecting data
Mm-hmm.
and that data is used for other teams to inform business decisions or improve the technical aspect of the app.
Okay.
Um, yeah,
So you get the metadata of the users who watch Netflix and you try to essentially improve the user experience based on that.
yeah, and more specifically on my side on the playback data. So when you watch Netflix, you have um, the player is actually sending events
Mm-hmm.
about how the playback is going. So specifically the stream. And so you have, when you request a movie, we get an event, and then when the movie actually starts, you get another event, and then if it rebuffers, there's an event, and we use all of that. For example, we calculate metrics. One is the play delay. The play delay is the delay between the time you requested the movie and the time
It starts.
the movie actually played.
Mm-hmm.
And then if there's rebuffers, we use them to see that there's an issue. So on the technical side, the kind of things that we might do is, okay, if there's more rebuffers on a Samsung TV from one date, then that's gonna be like we're gonna stop. It's gonna attract our attention. It's gonna be like, okay, what happened on that date? We're gonna start looking into is there an issue with that TV? Is there an update that came out on that date? Yeah, all sort of things like that.
Just to clarify,
Um,
what's a rebuffer exactly?
so rebuffer is when you're playing the movie and suddenly it stops and there's a wheel
Mm.
that shows up to say, okay, uh, it's pausing right now the movie to like load more video
Okay,
before
so yeah, it was when
continue
the
to play.
stream is interrupted because you don't have the data yet. Yeah, so I guess it's a
Yeah,
bad user experience. You want to minimize that.
yeah. And yeah, there's like, I mean, there's maybe I can share this is something I shared when I
Of
was
course.
presenting at a conference. Um, but yeah, there's this kind of triangle, which is very similar to the CAP theorem, for those who know, for the databases. So this one is more for streaming, and so the idea is the same, like a streaming or a video stream. If you want it to start fast, like the three things that you want it to start fast, like as soon as you request the movie, the play delay needs to be as small as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Then you want no rebuffer, ideally. So throughout the stream, you want the stream to like be smooth and uninterrupted,
Yeah.
and you want the highest quality. And the theorem says that if you pull on one, you can pull on one, like hike up the quality, but then you'll have to pay it back with either one or two of the other. So like start less fast, build up a bigger buffer, or you don't build up a big initial buffer, and then you'll have to rebuffer throughout the session, the viewing session.
I see. And for Netflix, do you
You,
have do you have any priorities among these three corner? Is which one will be the most important one for you?
I mean, yeah, for Netflix, since this is like, if we were to compare with another service like YouTube, um, our strategy is going to be obviously very different because For YouTube, it's small videos, quick. You're not immersed. So having rib buffers, so this one, throughout the video, that's going to be less of an issue than for Netflix. For Netflix, you know, you want the movie. You don't necessarily want the movie to start fast. For YouTube, you need the video to start fast because you're trying to look at something quick. So if it's gonna if the initial buffer is gonna take like a minute, like okay, you're gonna give up. But for Netflix, we kind of like give up more the start fast and minimize at all costs the real buffers. Obviously, the quality is important to be higher.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
yeah, basically like yeah, the priorities are gonna be different, but like we believe that we can push boundaries on all three sides. You know, just like database developers want to push the cap theorem as much as possible.
Yeah, I guess companies like just need to spend more money in order to push on all three fronts at once. I guess that's the fourth corner, like the money you invest in this.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
And in terms of this minimizing the rebuffer, is it the same like throughout the entire movie, or do you have like a way toward like, let's say if you rebuffer in the middle of the movie versus rebuffering at the beginning or at the end, does it matter for you, or is it all the same?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, we've I mean, initially when I started at Netflix, actually I started 5 years ago, a bit more than 5 years ago. I was like, okay, the rebuffer count, like we're counting the number of rebuffer for our session. I thought like the counter would be like, oh, just a counter, but it's actually more complicated than that. We're actually looking for multiple factors. Like you said, if a rebuffer happens at the beginning, it's less of an issue than if it happens in the middle of the session a bit later. That's obviously more an issue because the player should have understood the speed of the connection. It should have understood the stability if it's a stable or not, and it should have built an initial buffer big enough to withstand subsequent late rebuffers. So this is something that is we pay more attention to a later rebuffer than an initial rebuffer. Initial meaning like within the first few tens of seconds. But yeah, there are we also look at like there's a lot of things that are taken in consideration. Um, for example, if you have like let's say you have an internet connection that withstands can sustain kind of a 1K video, but not like we stream 4K. Something that we can do is when we encode the movie, we give a score to each scene, and that score is more or less high depending on if your eye is more likely to see a downshift in quality or not. I'll give you an example. Let's say you have a scene that is in the shade, like in the dark, and you see someone moving around, but like you could just see, like you cannot really see because it's in the dark. You just see the shade of the person passing by. The score of that scene will be really low because whether you're in 1K or 4K, it's not going to really matter. Like just the edge of the shadow you might see some pixels and something, but overall you're not going to see a very like much difference.
Yeah, makes sense.
So yeah, our player is gonna actually down the quality on purpose on a lower, like it's gonna it no it, the player is actually knows the score of upcoming scenes, and it knows also obviously your internet connection, where which server is going to connect, and so on. But the score of upcoming scene is going to be important for the decision that it's going to make, and it's going to make decisions like on purpose downing the quality for this session, for this this scene. Download it fast, and let's say the next scene is like suddenly there's fireworks. The score is going to be super high because when there's fireworks, there's a lot of details. If you don't have a high enough quality, your eye is more likely to see to notice that you're on a bad quality. So it will actually like download fast the first scene that is in the dark, and then spend a lot of time downloading the 4K quality for like the scene that has a higher score.
Yeah, I get it.
So overall, you feel like you've watched a high quality movie, but it's not been always 4K, for example.
Yeah, it's a nice trick. So yes, you're trying to maximize the bandwidth with the best kind of image that people will notice. Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah,
And so
exactly.
does it mean that when you prepare, like when you have a movie that you want to release on Netflix, you need to have essentially it prepared in many, many different kind of quality so that you can decide at runtime which chunk do you give in which quality? Or, and are there anything else that you need to do like in preparation?
Um, so yeah, actually, so one thing that I thought before was that, okay, you have like uh 10 1080p, 220, 4K,
Mhm.
whatever. For all those quality, I was thinking there will be one file for each, or like multiple files with like for each scene.
Yeah.
And that's it. But the thing is, it turns out that there is so many encoding technologies. So maybe we can remind was an encoder, but like or like more like a codec. So a
Okay.
codec is the combination of an encoder and a decoder. So you encode the movie into a file basically. And so there's so many different encoding technologies that are more or less supported by different devices. So like if you're on your phone, also depends on the platform, Android, iOS, I don't know, like your TV, depending on what set-top box you have and so on, they all support not necessarily the same codecs. So for the same quality, you're gonna have so many files, and it's actually interesting to see like if you pick one quality, you're gonna have so many different size of files, but like it's drastic. It's a order of magnitude. Some codecs are so much better than others, and yeah, so we're gonna serve the player is actually gonna ask for the right codec for the codec that it supports, and then the right quality and so on. So you have like I don't know for movie you have like 1,000 files because between all the qualities, all the codec, all the subtitles, all the languages, and audio also has different codecs, I guess. So yeah, we have to encode all of that. Plus give like scores for every scenes and everything, so that the player can choose the right quality.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I think we never think really about encoders nowadays because I mean you just get the data and you assume that it's always the same. But that's true that I guess on old TVs and on new laptop or on your phone it may not be the same. Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, and now we have more challenges because we're doing live. So the way we used to be able like to just encode offline. Now we have to encode live. So yeah, that's a separate challenge that we're solving now.
What do you mean by encoding live?
So with SVOD, so video on demand, you shot movies, and
Yeah,
then you have the raw files and everything, and then you have I don't know, you have multiple days to encode
that's
movies, so
uh,
you can
yeah.
run, and it's like intensive.
Hmm.
So yeah, I mean we run it on the cloud, but you have multiple days. It doesn't matter that you do it like instantly. Whereas with live, you actually shot the scene, encode as um, yeah, as you shot the scene, and then you have to stream it. So you have to encode in all possible codecs and everything live.
That's interesting. I didn't
It's
know
kind
that.
of like this.
Yeah, I didn't know that Netflix had a live media. I thought it was all like series and movies.
Now we just launched live shows now.
Oh, nice.
Um, yeah, it's like new innovation. But yeah, I mean, I guess the difference is, when you send on WhatsApp recorded messages versus versus right now we're like, talking live. So
Yeah, I understand. And so coming back to like, so essentially your department, like what are the maybe like interesting or unexpected things that you have discovered, like your data analytics department discovered about the people using Netflix, like things that, you probably didn't expect or...
yeah, actually, there's those events that I was talking about that we're collecting. Um, there's been there's been um, there's been instances where we were like, okay, it sounds like on that movie, people are replaying a lot one scene.
Mhm.
So we were like, okay, why were people replaying that scene? And looking at the scene, we actually found out that the person was uh, like it was not, that scene was not understandable, and this is why people are replaying a lot that scene. So actually, yeah, the scene has been reshot just for this, because we inferred that people don't understand, what's being said during that scene, or what's happening basically.
Oh, it's very
But yeah,
interesting.
more generally, um, we use that data for like business decisions, such as are we going to do season 2 of that season 2 free, or follow up seasons basically.
Yeah,
Are people engaged really into the episodes, or like the movie itself? This is a more business side than technical.
I understand. So it's very interesting. I didn't imagine that you could just reshoot a scene based on data. So I guess you still need to have the crew and all the actors ready. But it's really...
Um, I don't know exactly if I'm a data engineer, so
Yeah.
I provide the data. I heard about stuff that happened, but I don't know if it was like fully reshot, or if they just like added the sound on top, or if it's been just re-edited.
Mhm.
Yeah. So
Also, I think there is an episode of Black Mirror when you can actually decide what's gonna happen next, a bit like the book where you're the hero. So I guess you can also try to find out some analytics of what people like, what kind of decision they would like to make, and it must be cool to see that.
y- y- yeah, actually, as it's interesting that you mention it. It's Black Mirror Bandersnatch.
Yeah.
I would recommend, right? It's really uh, so basically the idea is that it's interactive content. So instead of sitting and watching a movie and be a passenger, the idea is that you're active in the movie. So I don't know, someone comes and like ask you a question. It will actually ask you, okay, answer the question, and here is two choices. Uh, if you don't choose anything, it's going to go on, but the go on with like the default option. But you can actually rewatch the movie multiple times and do different choices, and it's a different movie. And we did that. It was like really a good success, and because it was a success, now we're actually moving into gaming. So Netflix is, in case you don't know, is a cloud gaming company.
I didn't know.
I'm not focused on that, but that was sourced from the interactive content. Um, so I don't have much info about like the gaming. It's a whole different department. But yeah, we're gonna be running like games in the cloud. Actually, we are right now. So you can pull Netflix and go. There's a row games, and you can play again.
I'll check out. Cool. And in terms of the data analytics, so what kind of technology do you use to process all this data?
We happen to use Scala.
Surprise.
No, but in terms of framework, we use mainly Spark and Flink.
Okay.
So Spark mostly for batch processing, and Flink mostly for streaming. We also have a little bit. I mean, we're currently trying Spark streaming. I mean, actually, we're in production with Spark streaming, but it's not like super widespread. And they don't. Spark streaming and Flink are solving different problems in the sense that Flink is like actual streaming, Spark streaming is micro batching, and we also use Spark batch or just batch.
I see.
In my team, we write well in my smallest team, I guess. We write both in Scala, but some people I heard some people write in Java.
Okay. And why do you think Scala is Netflix makes the choice of Scala for data analytics? Why do you think it's a good choice, or not?
I definitely think it's a good choice, but why that choice? I don't think it's sourced by the fact that it's a good programming language. I think it's just because people choose a framework and then that framework was the language of that framework. It happens to be Spark happens to be Scala, so people started to write Scala. Even though you can write Python, we have a lot of PySpark at Netflix. Not I mean a little bit in my team. I'm not directly working on those jobs, but yeah, I think it's just sourced from the framework, to be honest.
I see. And do you use Scala also for like microservices, or it's only for data analytics?
We have some services written in Scala within the data org. They're more like tools for analyzing the data and so on. With an interface which is actually written in Scala.js. It's actually a full stack app that we wrote, and we happen to be like Scala developers, so we just like wrote it in Scala.js everywhere. But microservices outside, like in the engineering side, there's unfortunately I don't probably there must be some, but I don't have too much knowledge around it. I know we had a scheduler that was like scheduling jobs, like kind of like Airflow, that was written in Scala, but it's been pivoted to Java now.
And how does it work technologically speaking? Like, does each team is responsible for these technical choices, or do you have like some kind of guidelines company-wide of what you should use?
Yeah, actually, it's a good question because we have I believe it's a little bit different than other companies, especially when it's a bigger company. We have this part of the culture, which is like super big, is like freedom and responsibility. Maybe some people who I think there's a book about Netflix that has been written by the founder, yeah. And so it applies everywhere, including choosing tech. So you kind of have the freedom of doing whatever you want, choosing whatever tech you want and so on. But then it comes with responsibility of running it. If like you need to be doing good judgment to have good judgment on I'm gonna be a little bit like trying new stuff here, but if it doesn't work, it's gonna fall on you. So you need to be have a good balance of judgment on it. And then we have this concept of page path. So whether for us it's gonna be like platform, for example, Spark, Flink, those are page path because they are supported by a team. There's a team that has dedicated time on it. So those are page path, and if you have any issue or anything, you can first, because it's page path, you'll have more users on it, so more help around you, but also like community, kind of internal community, but also help from like support from an actual team that you can page and so on if there's an incident. If you're off the page path, teams are not. So something that I like at Netflix is that you can still request help. People are not going to be like, hey, why are you off the page path? Questioning all your decisions at this moment. They're not like that. They're like, okay, I'll help you the best I can. But then they might not be able to help. Personally, I found sometimes using a technology that is off the paper internally, but has a large community outside, on the open source side, might sometimes overcome the internal support. So this is interesting.
Yeah, it's true, because quite often big companies, like, I don't know, like I know for Amazon or Google, they have their own copy or own version of open source software. So in a sense, like, it might be tweaked to your companies, but you can't really Google a solution because it's internal. So I guess it's a balance.
Yes, and we do like the Spark and Flink that we're using are not exactly copies, but they're like NF Flink, we call it Netflix Flink. And there's a Spark is a little bit modified, but the modification is super light. And it's not like we took it and modified it. I think Spark used to be a bit more like 2 years ago or something. It was like very very like modified, and the patch set was a bit too large. I think now we got like we have Holden who's working on it, who is like a long-term Apache Spark contributor. I think she backported the patch set into the open source community.
Like,
So our patch set is actually much smaller, a bit more like modular and everything. So in case people wonder why are we modifying it, there's a lot of things that does not suit for a use case uh, uh, because of the scale at which we're running it. Sometimes I run jobs and it's like the number of servers is like in thousands, like 5,000 servers, whatever. If it's the maximum that I schedule, but this is crazy. Like one thing that we're running everything on AWS, so we don't own any servers. That's also something that's interesting for a large company. And before I was at a more like a startup, and I've always been told that the cloud is infinite. And since I started to work on Netflix, I'm being told that the cloud is not infinite. So, okay, especially during COVID time, it was like, we're like, okay, is it gonna work?
did you reach out some limits? Like, you were not able to get more servers or something like this?
I don't think we hit any limits, but it worked. It worked fine, but there was questions. As far as I know, there was questions between AWS and us about like, hey, is it gonna work? Like, how far it's gonna work? Because we're seeing like the graphs going up with so many people streaming, being locked in their homes. But yeah, I mean, it worked fine, and it worked fine to the point that um, we have this chaos monkey that just like randomly goes and turns off stuff. So we're like, I think it's called we call it chaos engineering. Um, uh, what people don't realize is that we also have its big brother, which is called Kong. And Kong is actually shutting down whole region, whole AWS region. And so it's like a whole data center, basically. It just comes in and shuts it down. And this is happening. It might be happening right now. I don't know. I mean, it's nice. It puts something in your calendar saying it's happening. So that if you're questioning, you look at your calendar. Okay, this is happening. uh, but um, but that thing was during COVID was running. With this, there was no decision of turning it off.
Yeah, it's very courageous. I think so many companies are already cautious about what they put in prod, and but I guess it's the only way to really have a reliable system. You need to have these issues all the time in order to have a system that recovers.
Yeah, and I think so. There's like it's one thing to be highly available, but I think the buzzwords, I guess, is disaster recovery or something like that,
Yeah.
when it's like between multiple cluster. Um, that's being tested in production, which is I found it interesting, but yeah, at least it proves that it works. But
That's really cool. And coming back to Spark, one thing that I've always heard is, I mean, at least a few years ago, it was kind of Spark was a bit holding the Scala compiler version. Like quite a few companies were blocked on Scala 2.11 because the Spark version at the time was locked to this. Is it still the case nowadays, or can you actually run like Spark on Scala 3, or what is the latest supported version?
well, the latest supported version on the open source side is 2.13, which is, I would argue that it's way behind because we're on Scala 3, whatever. But the advantage of Scala 2.13 is that it understands, it compiles to Tasty and understand Tasty. So Tasty is like this layer of so instead of just compiling to bytecode and introducing like binary compatibility between every minor version that let's say that's how Scala 2 was working. Every minor version, suddenly we broke binary compatibility. We have to like move all together the whole tree of dependencies. Now it kind of compiles to this middle layer, Tasty, which I don't think I'm the right person to explain what Tasty is, but like I think it stands for Typed Abstract Syntax Tree, and
Really?
why to make it tasty. That's from what I understand. And that so combining to that means that we can write an app in 2.13 that depends on a Scala 3, or vice versa. I have an app in Scala 3 and depend on the library that is 2.13. And in fact, this is what we're doing right now in my team. There's also another team that is doing that, and meaning that we run actually Scala 3, the latest version. So like as of today, it's 3.4.1.
So you use Scala 3 in your Spark jobs?
We do, yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
Which is, I mean, I don't know. I don't know if it's a nice move or reckless move. But we do have we do run on Scala 3, so it came with some challenges because the fact that we depend on Spark 2.13 is okay, but the problem is that Spark. So the few things that are not handled by like the tasty layer, kind of like abstraction between the two, is anything macros.
Yeah.
And any reflection, I think Scala like macros and reflection, and meaning that I think it's type tag that is not there. I believe it's type tag, and type tag is used for encoders, Spark encoders.
Yeah.
So encoders are used for serializing, deserializing the result. I mean, it's for specifically for data sets. So every time you map, you have to have an encoder for the type that you're outputting in your map function. And so there's a library that we're using. Forgot who wrote it. Vincent Sobas. I'll
Yeah, I
share
will add a
this.
link below.
Yeah, we're using that Spark Scala free library that provides encoders for it. So they kind of rewrote the encoders based on Scala free macros, I guess. And it works. It actually works better than the standard Spark. I mean, if tomorrow, I don't know how they're going to solve it when they're going to upgrade eventually to Scala free, like Spark. But the current way Spark is providing encoders is based on reflection. It's like it's not easy to customize your I mean, for example, we wanted to use, instead of a long, for like some duration, we wanted to use finite duration, the actual type. But then the finite duration, you obviously cannot write it to a table like this. So you need to like serialize it or encode it somehow. And so you need to provide a custom encoder for it. And the current way it's working in Spark is like it was not very easy to do. And with that library, that solves its primary goal is actually running Spark on Scala free. It's providing a framework for writing serializer and deserializer that then eventually translate to an encoder, a Spark encoder. Is actually really nice. We used it for like customizing some of the fields that we have, and we were not able to do that before.
That's cool.
Completely
And
unrelated to Scala free, but yeah.
is it the same? Is there still the same problem? I remember, I mean, I haven't used Spark in many years, but there was an issue before with enumeration. You know, when you had a seal trait, it was actually difficult to have an encoder for these sort of things. I think there were some external libraries providing it. But I guess, is it still the case right now in Spark 2.13, and maybe is it fixed with this new library?
No, it's the same thing in plain Spark. It's not as nice as Circe or I mean they created this encoder which is like I guess it's a type class, I don't know, but nothing followed behind it. Behind it's just reflection. So I don't understand why they created this type class and then ended up writing something behind that is like just doing reflection. And that library is Scala free is really adding they defined type class serializer and deserializer, and then they use those two to create encoder, which I guess for Circe would have been a codec. Encoder and decoder, the combination of both does a codec. So the naming is a little bit weird here, but
But
yeah.
it's cool that Spark allows like custom like libraries like this to essentially provide like custom codecs and that it still works. You know.
I guess yeah, the fact that they use the CL type class allows it, allows to have these libraries writing different encoders.
Have you noticed any difference between like Scala 2 and Scala 3 in terms of performance? So when you switch to it,
Running performance, no, I don't think there will be any difference. However, in compilation, we do our code base is drastically faster, and I don't think it's because of the like Scala 3 being faster on its own. I think it's because of the macros. Even though we didn't write macros ourselves, you eventually depend on macros. We use Circe, so we have automatic derivation, just like a lot of people. And obviously, this automatic derivation eventually is using macros. Even if it's using shapeless, eventually shapeless is using macros. Mm. So the automatic derivation of case classes and so on is much faster because of the new macro, I guess.
yeah. And I think I might be wrong, but I think the implicit resolution is also faster. I think it was like when you had many implicit, it was I think quite slow in Scala 2, but I think I've heard at least that it's one improvement in Scala 3, but I might be wrong. Yeah, and so in the engineering department, do you know roughly like how many people uses Scala in the department? Like how many engineers are involved?
I would say between 200 and 300.
Wow.
Yeah, something like that. Because we're more. I mean, the whole org grew significantly in the last year even. We must be at least 500 total, and I would say half of them are using Scala.
That's amazing.
Something around that.
Really cool.
Yeah, that's and this is sometimes this is interesting because we have we do not have a team that like platform team that is supporting us for like tooling. I know Twitter and so on, like they do have a huge like people dedicated to helping for tooling. We don't have any, but we actually automatically fall back to the Java team because there's a Java team, and sometimes it doesn't work as nicely with like even just cross compilation and stuff like that. If you're using the page path, which is going to be Gradle internally, we don't use Gradle in my team. We use Mill, but uh, we're off the page path basically. So we won't have all the help that the Java team could help. So often the fact that we are a critical mass of I believe we are a critical mass of people writing Scala analytics, but the Java team doesn't all necessarily see it that way.
Oh yeah,
I mean,
I
they have
guess
so many Java users. I guess we're a drop in the bucket.
yeah, but 200-300 developers, it's still significant.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, cool. So you say you use Mill as a build tool. Was it always the case from the beginning, or did you move from SBT to Mill at some point?
Most of everyone is using Gradle. So the repo when I joined was Gradle.
Okay.
We actually used I don't know. I have a hard time with Gradle. I questioned myself to I was questioning myself. Is it me who does not know the tool, and so I cannot do whatever I want because I don't have the knowledge, or is it really the tool and everything? I don't know. Personally, I think it's the tool. It's very very slow. Also, there's another thing, and so we actually moved to SBT in the past, and then I watched some video from Liaoyi about Mule, and I was looking because I was actually trying to do some stuff with SBT. So I'm a big fan of like having the build tool build, but also do other things like deploying Spark jobs. I don't know. I'm running a job. Spark jobs run on a cluster. Before we had to like, you compile the jar, but that's not enough. Then you need to do a stock submit and everything. So I think it's common for people to write a script that executes your. I mean, I guess your script has to execute your build at some point, but then it starts to be messy, especially when when I schedule the job. I'll give you an example. Like if I build Spark, I build an app, Spark app, and then I submit to a cluster. I have to specify which cluster I want and which Scala version I want. So I might be building my app for 213. Doesn't matter if it's Scala free or like Scala free, and then I want to schedule it to if I schedule it to a 212 cluster, it's not gonna work. It's gonna block with like no such method exception or something. So I have to like have the same version. And if you have, instead of a script, you just like have it in the build tool, like a plugin. The plugin can start looking at, okay, what version of Scala you're talking about, and so on, and you schedule to the right cluster. And so yeah, I was writing those plugins kind of, and we also have like workflows like Airflow, kind of like we don't use Airflow, we use an internal thing that is supposed to be open source, but yeah, I was writing those plugins, and I really had a hard time with SVG, just because it's very hard to understand the scoping mechanism and everything. And when I saw Mill was just plain Scala, it's basically plain Ammonite shell kind of code with a library that is providing caching for some of the the targets that you run targets when you run commands. Those targets are like provide caching capabilities, and it was like super simple, no scoping, very simple. And so we actually switched everything to it, and it was like so easy, so great. Like we're writing just script files, but like we call them inside Mill and so on. It's really nice.
Yeah, Liaoyi was telling me a few weeks ago that the goal of Mill was to make it as user friendly as possible. So it seems that You're like a good user experience like with this.
Yeah, it's also, I think people complain whenever there's a new tool, the documentation obviously is not going to be there. But it's just like, I don't think I need documentation with Meal because um, whatever, oftentimes you have a command line tool and you're like, okay, what are the commands I can do? And you start fiddling around either with doc or like you try -h, help, you try to look for things. Here it's following the code. So, just like when you code, you call a function, you have to like, um, you know, if you do it canonical, it's going to be the package name, then dot the object if it's an object. Obviously, it has to be instantiated like an object, not like a class, and then dot a function. Literally in Meal, you can just try that. You can browse in your build.sc, it's the build file, and just look at the names, whatever you have. You can even use like, sometimes I write the command that I'm gonna write into the build.sc and like use autocompletion like control space, and I see the command and like I'm like, okay, yeah, I'll copy paste in the shell and it's working. It's just working. Like there's nothing that can beat that. Like I don't think in SVT maybe I can browse a little bit. Yeah, I guess the keys and so on, but there's like auto import, some magic going on, and you're quickly lost.
That's really
Yeah,
cool.
if you can call it in the code, you can call it.
Nice. A good user experience. I still need to give it a shot at Meal, but everyone who told me about Meal, they're really happy. So I should definitely give it a
There's
shot.
also I've been eyeing Scala CLI. Actually, we're using Scala CLI. I mean, we're not using per se in a project, but for like simple projects, like meaning non-multi-project, multi-module. Sorry. I would go with Scala CLI actually. It's even simpler. If you don't have, like, we have to write like plugins and maybe with scripts, you will get away. It's really nice. Like Scala CLI is really good too.
Yeah, I've tried my first script with Scala CLI a couple of weeks ago, and I was very impressed. Like very simple to get it working.
There's been instances where we were using, so we had one app that needed to we have like submit schemas and stuff like that. I need to connect to a schema registry and push a schema with like, it was Avro. I was using Avro 4S. We derive Avro schema from case classes with Avro 4S.
Mm-hmm.
And I was trying to submit it to automatically to
Schema
the
registry.
schema registry. And obviously with like authentication. So we have something that is really cool internally. It uses it's like it uses your key, but like your local key. But you basically, we have a library, a Java library that generates a SSR context. And then once you have a SSR context, you can plug it into anything. And that SSR context is loaded from your local key, and you have like authentication that asks your phone and everything. But like, it's really nice the way it integrates to like any app. So I just wrote like something to submit the key, the schema, sorry.
Mm-hmm.
And there was an issue, whatever, with the authentication, and we were trying to debug it. And I was asking help from the security department at Netflix, and like, there was no way. I need to show like a really small case of reproducing case.
Yeah.
And I put it in in Scala CLI. I just sent like the file Scala CLI and the file, the actual code. And that person, doesn't matter if they have Java, like zero. They can have zero, nothing on their laptop, like brand new install. And she was able to like run it and like be like, okay, I see what's going on. Which is ironic because I did it in Scala. I don't think they use Scala. They're mostly Java developers. But the experience for her was better than Java. If I was a Java developer, I wouldn't be able to like send code like this. To
Yeah,
just
I think
execute
really
full
like
code.
it makes scripting like very easy. Like it's a bit like this Ammonite script when you put your dependency on top and you just start writing code immediately. It's very and it's super
Yeah.
simple to install. Like it's not like yeah, it's very straightforward.
Personally, I don't even install it. I just have like Scala CLI, the file in along in the repo. And you
Okay.
do Scala or whatever you name it. I name it Scala because I know it's supposed to become the actual Scala, not Scala CLI.
Yeah.
And yeah, just like /Scala, and then literally, if you have the repo, if you somehow checked out the repo from Git, so you have Git installed on your laptop, there's nothing else you need. No Java, nothing, because Scala CLI will download Java for you.
Nice, interesting. I didn't. Yeah, I wasn't sure about this. So it will install also the JVM for you, like.
I don't. So I don't think the right word is like installing it, but it will pull it for you. Just for this,
Yeah,
just for Zovska, yeah. And you can do like dash JVM, whatever
and you
version you
can select
want.
different version. Yeah.
Yeah, so you can usually say, oh, I want to run it with like 9, Java 9, and see like, is it working on 17? It's 17, boom, it runs with 17. Okay,
Yeah, it's really.
really cool.
Yeah, definitely. So because previously it was always fiddly to switch between different JVMs, and you were always afraid to break your installation. So it's really cool that it makes it like in a sandbox, and yeah, it's
Yeah,
very
it's really
project.
good.
So coming back to your data engineering team, so I guess you're constantly hiring because we're such a large department. So is it all your department? Is it based in the US or do you have it in other regions in the world?
Um, so Netflix is like in many places in the world. But technical side, I know we have a big office in Amsterdam,
Mm-hmm.
in Europe, and but around in other places, I'm not too sure. But we kind of like depends on your org and your teams, I guess. But since COVID, we're kind of like remote. I'm remote now since COVID. And so within US, working anywhere within US is easy for me, but I don't know if I have a US contract, so I can go kind of like with the approval of your manager, but that's it. I can be anywhere in US, but for people in Europe, um, I'm not too sure how it goes. But I know there's like some people who move from here to Europe,
I see.
um, from US
And
to
is,
Europe.
and is it easy for do Netflix hire people in Europe or in other region and move them to the US, or you have to be in the US first to apply?
At the time, I don't know what's the current situation, but at the time I got hired, I was actually living in London. So they actually moved me to San Francisco, and did the visa and everything. But nowadays, with the fact that we're more inclined to work remotely, unless your job requires to be on site. Um, I'm not sure. I'm not sure they would bother with like the visa process and everything.
Okay,
And
I might check their maybe Netflix job application. Maybe it's didn't mention, or if you have the chance by any chance to talk to the HR and confirm it, I will add a small comments below the video.
yeah,
And
I can check.
thanks. And how does the interview process work at Netflix? Is it like standardized a bit like, maybe Google or Meta when you have, you essentially apply for a generic developer position and eventually you go to a particular team? Or do you actually apply for a particular team in the first place?
Yeah, that's a good question. Because we're pretty different from I think we're pretty different from other like Google and so on, and Facebook and so on, in the sense that they tend to have recruiters. You go into a well formatted recruiting process, and then you end up in a like bucket where people are uh, pulled from into teams. For
Yeah.
us, it's a little bit different. It's a bit more like managers are looking for. It all starts from managers looking for staff in their team. There will be a job posting, but then usually it's managers contacting directly people. It could be recruiters, internal recruiters contacting you, um, but it's generally for a specific role, or multiple roles, and they will actually kind of redirect you. But it's not like a super standard process. And speaking about the process, so like the interactions that you're gonna have for one team or another is going to be very different,
I see.
depending on how the manager conduct interviews.
So it's not necessarily going to be like some like a drilling, algorithm question like you may have in Google when you need to prepare for months. It may be actually more like what you get in other like companies when like 2 or 3 rounds and with discussions and not necessarily like drilling algorithm.
Yeah, for me, it was I had a friendly chat with the manager, and then a more like a follow up interview with an HR, a talent person, like HR person, that was asking me questions about like culture fit. And then the third contact was with an actual engineer from the team, and it was it was like questions around like very technical question. And then I had like I mean throughout between all the specific interviews, you also get on the phone with your manager. I guess now it's video, it's not phone anymore. And they tell you like feedback about how you did and so on, like what's the next step. And then I had it on site, which now is virtual, like more like video. And you see like it's usually a full day, so you'll meet like people from the team, the manager, the people you're gonna work with outside of the team, at least like someone like a director, and so on. Like it's kind of like a panel.
I see. Okay, so it's a pretty thorough process, but at least not too much algorithm based, I guess. So what are the things that you are looking for in candidates? Like, what are the important aspect? Like,
For us, generally, I generally do the interviews for like more distributed, like software distributed systems. So
Mhm.
yeah, obviously we're looking for like not necessarily a specific language. Like we don't specifically look for Scala, because that can be solved. Like you can learn it on the side. And but we're looking like for good problem solving skills. Um, we do live coding, where we have like a bunch of questions, which are like not like lead code, more like actual Netflix related issues that we had. We're like asking those questions. So that's more problem solving. And
Yeah.
then there's also a lot of questions around distributed systems. So like more like if you use Spark or Flink, you usually know how to answer that question. Um, how does things work when it's distributed? It's very different from having the same problem solved on one machine.
Yeah, for sure. And
Skews and stuff.
I heard at some point that Netflix was only hiring like senior developers. Is it still the case nowadays, or do you have like a wider range of applicants?
That's not the case anymore. So we used to have we used to be all kind of flat structure. I mean, it's still pretty flat, but for individual contributor, like meaning non-manager, non-director, we used to all be senior. That's it. But there was a push for potentially having the ability to hire more junior people, which we could have done before, but then that means since we don't have levels, we didn't have levels. It was out for having the infrastructure for like assigning or like taking for juniors taking tasks that are a little bit easier, or like maybe training programs and so on. We didn't have all this thing because we just assume everyone is senior. So now we have levels, and they put kind of everyone that was in the company, the kind of senior level is like level 5, and some people went level 6 because it made sense. Some people actually, a tiny bit of people that were just hired were on level 4. But now we have like levels, so yeah, we can hire more junior people and more senior people too.
That's nice. And I don't know if you are able to share this kind of information, but can you give me like an idea of what the salary range for, like, let's say, a senior engineer at Netflix? Or
that's going to depend, I guess.
in the US?
But yeah, I can speak for the US maybe a little bit, but like, I mean, yeah, it's gonna depend a lot. I would recommend to look at the jobs on jobs.netflix.com. I believe we have some salary ranges there. And also another website that I used in the past was in the US for the tech. And that's not specific to Netflix. It's like any companies. You can look at levels.fyi.
Cool.
It's a good website. People love levels.fyi.
Let me see if I can find it quickly. So Netflix.
People report
So is it this?
report salaries there. Yeah.
So
yeah.
is it like, so it's people, you said it's people who report their own salary, like
Yeah.
without mentioning their name, like anonymously. So it's not
Exactly. It's like Glassdoor, but for some reason this one is more accurate than Glassdoor.
And so the level, so this level 3 will be like what, a junior developer? Is it this?
I think so.
And what will be senior developer here?
It's L5, so I think L3 is something like junior. L4 is just standard. Like if you're data engineer, you're a data engineer on L4. L5, you're a senior data engineer, and then level 6. I don't know if there's a name. I might have forgotten it. And I mean, we don't necessarily refer to like senior really, or like those titles. Maybe it's like something like principal. I don't know.
Yeah, like staff or stuff like this. Yeah.
Yeah, level 7. There's not many. There are not many.
Well, 1.1 million. Yeah. So, but so essentially here, I mean, according to this site, I know you're not telling me this, but according to this site, a senior engineer earn around €500,000 a year. That's pretty nice. Is it true? So does it come on top of because like other big tech firms, they also have stock options, but is it the case also on Netflix, or is
no, actually, this again, one thing that we're different from is we everything is base salary, and we don't have bonuses or anything. We don't have stock options. I mean, we actually have a stock option program, but we don't have stocks like RSUs. So you get your base salary, and you can make a choice every year to like how much of that salary you want to get in cash, or how much of it you want to get in stock options. Options to buy the Netflix stock.
I see.
Whereas, yeah, as far as I understand, other companies have more like they give you a base salary, and then they give you RSUs, and then they also give you a bonus at the end of the year. We don't have that.
It's good you don't have this, what they call this golden handcuff, where essentially you can't leave the company, otherwise you're going to lose too much of your RSU. So I guess you don't have.
Yeah, that was. This is the thinking behind the I guess the compensation logic here is that if you want to leave, the idea is that you're gonna, if you have golden handcuffs, you're gonna do a bad job at so it's beneficial for both parties to like for you to leave, and that's the idea. And leave whenever you want, not wait for the bonus.
Yeah, I also prefer this myself. But cool. So I will probably add a couple of links below the video to mention like where you can apply, and maybe some jobs in your team, or maybe that you can recommend me. And if people are interested, I'm sure that that sounds definitely interesting. Another thing I wanted to discuss, a completely different subject, is that I know that you developed an open source Kubernetes client in Scala. Like, are you still working on this product nowadays?
Actually, so I'm not. This is something I developed in a previous company before.
Mm-hmm.
But it's funny because that project is actually really active, and that's nowadays that's how I get up to date with new features on Kubernetes because I'm not I'm running at Netflix. I'm running apps. As far I count them, and then as far as it goes now, it runs somewhere. It's not my problem. So I don't like any I don't deal with like
Deployment.
Kubernetes anymore or
Yeah.
breaking or anything. But this project I've been really surprised because I kind of like open sourced it, and then it just took off. I mean, it didn't took off like crazy, but it's I get pull requests quite often in there. So I know Apple is actually using it.
Oh, nice.
Um,
I
yeah,
think
they
this
have
is
a
the clients,
fork of
right?
it.
This is
Second,
the Kubernetes. This is your library, right? Your Kubernetes clients.
yeah,
Nice.
yeah, that's the one.
I will also add
And
a link to this video.
yeah, they're using it to deploy all their services like everything, iCloud and everything, because they are multi-cloud and they have to like they deploy through these Kubernetes in different clouds, and then they deploy apps on Kubernetes. But yeah, it's
Yeah.
kind of interesting that people really like use it now. So it's interesting.
It's always nice, like
Yes.
especially nice when your project you don't have to maintain it too much, and you have other people taking over.
Yeah, sometimes I get like pull requests, and I'm like, diving into the context of why this is needed and what is this new feature. Like now I have to like go into read the Kubernetes documentation to understand what the hell is this. But now I made someone maintainer with me who was like contributing often. So yeah, shout out to him. I forgot his name. uh,
It's no worries. I will.
but
I will add
he's
it.
on the repo. You got
Yeah,
it.
yeah. I always have these issues with names. Even people that I know well, I forgot the name, so it happens.
Yeah. Um, yeah, that's my issue.
No worries. And so, and what is the tech stack for your Kubernetes clients? Like, what Scala? What kind of Scala do you use there?
Oh yeah, so that repo is like heavily using Cat's effect.
Uh-huh.
So I think this is what appealed people because there was like when I put links in the repo about other at the end of the README there's a related project. I think there's Kuber, and there's also I mean you can also use Kubernetes client for Java from Scala, and that one is like it's maintained by it's like actually the official one. So the question is why would I use this one as opposed to the official one or one that existed previously, Scuba. The idea is that this one is like is using Cat's effect. If you have your app is all written in Cat's effect, this is really nice. It integrates very well. And also one thing that was not in Scuba at the time was that the API evolved so fast, and at least at the time it was like evolving so fast the Kubernetes API that writing like objects like case classes and so on that you're sending, it was really hard to keep up to date with all of that. But luckily they're publishing a Swagger API. So if you look at the code that this project has, it's not much. There's not much project files there, and that's because I wrote instead of writing all the payloads, I actually wrote a plugin that reads the Swagger API and generates the objects for it. So technically, we're always up to date.
And what do you
Because
use to
yeah,
generate these case class?
I wrote a plugin. It's a Meal plugin. I mean, it was SBT at the time, but now this project is on Meal. And yeah, it's just I wrote something that reads the Swagger and generates case classes for it. There's no library.
Nice. It could be useful
I
actually.
mean the generator is like 270 line. It's not that much. But yeah, I mean you read the JSON and then you're like, okay, it's not that complicated to read a Swagger.
Do you generate also the HTTP client as well, like for each method, or is it just the case classes?
Those are not generated. Only the payloads are generated,
Yeah.
and
Okay.
then the functions for like it's kind of like a maybe evolved crude app client kind of. You create the pod, you update it, you delete it, I don't know. There's many other actions. I mean, obviously there's like more complex actions like you can exec on a pod, so meaning you can like kind of SSH kind of like in a pod. So you can execute commands in there and so on. But then it's not just pods. There are so many other things. You have like namespaces trying to pull the client. Let's see, like jobs, cron jobs, deployments. You can deploy like deployment strategy and so on. Stateful sets, replicate sets and so on. Like I mean, there's so many stuff.
The API is very large.
Yeah, you can generate. You can manage secrets with it. So yeah, but one thing that I was happy about on this project was the testing coverage. I'm not very good at testing. I know it. It's one of my weakness. And on this one, there is like we have a system of like because you can create and delete and update a secret just like you can create and delete a job. We kind of like abstracted over those things, those actions, and then you can mix in those threads into tests for a job, and then you define how to like create, I think, or like I think creation is the same, but like you define, okay, it's a job, it's not a secret. Here it's a secret, and then the coverage is like so good because it's like testing every single thing of the library, and we also run it against a lot of versions of Kubernetes.
So is it like a local test, or is it actually an integration test when you spin up a cluster and you can spin up some pods? Do you do both?
It's an integration test.
Okay.
It's using GitHub workflows, and it's spinning Minikube. Sorry, and it's actually spinning a Minikube for like what 5 versions. So like from V121 right now to all the versions up to 125. I don't know. We must be late by 1 or 2 versions, but Kubernetes is so back compatible forever. It's okay. But yeah, the test runs against all of them, which makes me question how much Microsoft is paying for GitHub to like run all those things. I don't know, for free.
I was gonna say you don't need to pay for all this integration tests.
I know, and I don't understand why.
That's amazing.
That's a question. Yeah.
But you need to spin up a new job that actually mines some bitcoins, and you can start to make some money.
I don't know how they prevent that. Actually, that's a really good question. It's pretty good. The CI stuff is really good.
Yeah, I think there were, was it Circle CI, or there were other CI before that offered like free tier, but now I think like GitHub CI is so good and free that many of these I think they stopped.
The default choice.
Yeah. Interesting. Cool. It looks very good project.
We're compiling Scala free also on this one.
Oh, cool. So
I
amazing.
guess most of those stuff are on Scala free except Spark.
So does it mean that your project for the Kubernetes clients, does it cross-compile to Scala 213 and Scala 3, or do you just...
I'm just seeing it. I think it's 212, 212 to 213 and 3.
Yeah, also that probably covers everything.
Which yeah, we have a project internally at Netflix, which we're also it's a library we're also cross compiling between all those versions 212, 213, and 3. Which I at the beginning I didn't think it would work, but it did.
Nice. Cool, but thank you very much, Joan. I think it was super interesting to talk to you. I learned a lot about Netflix, and it's very interesting to learn that you actually use Scala 3 and Spark internally. I didn't know that it was even possible, so it's quite courageous of you to give it a shot. And yeah, thank you very much, Joan.
Nice. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for the interview. Yeah. Thanks.
Have a nice day.
Yeah.
See you. Bye.
Bye.